Dan, we are live and people are just tuning in, so we'll give it just about a minute before we get started in earnest. But just to remind everybody, thanks for taking time out of your summer vacations this week to join us today. I'm Michael Romita, the President and CEO of the Westchester County Association, and this is the second of our three-part Summer Cyber Series presented by AnatomyIT. Our first Lunch and Learn session focused on recent changes to cybersecurity and how to protect your organization. This second session will focus on artificial intelligence and how it's being used by both attackers and by defenders. And in our final session, which is taking place on September 18th, we will walk you through an actual code dark scenario and how to respond to an actual attack with a case study. Please remember to register for these virtual presentations either through our website or Melissa here in our office will drop something in the chat. Don't forget also that on October 1st, the WCA is partnering with the county government here in Westchester and the STEM Alliance to launch the region's first ever Converge conference on digital connectivity. That is live with multiple panels, discussions, and networking opportunities. Now, a few housekeeping items to keep in mind. First, all participants are in listen-only mode, so if you have questions, please drop them in the chat and we will monitor those as they come in and answer as many as we can between now and the end of the presentation. You'll also receive a recording of the webinar sent to the email that you registered with. Now, this month marks the 25th anniversary of The Matrix, which is the, hold on a second. There, that's better. This month marks the 25th anniversary of The Matrix, which is the ultimate AI cyber attack movie. And while we may not be living currently in a computer simulation, after today's presentation, you'll gain the knowledge to ask yourself, are you going to choose the red pill or are you going to choose the blue pill? That may be the first question that I'll present to our moderator, Bill Sintiris, who is the CPO at AnatomyIT. I got to take these off because I can't memorize this last part. But Bill is a seasoned IT professional with over 20 years of experience in IT, SaaS, and cloud, committed to delivering quality management services to healthcare clients in particular. Before joining AnatomyIT, Bill served as the COO of Amadeus Hospitality, where he led global operations and gained significant experience in M&A integration. He has a proven track record of driving strategic initiatives and cultivating motivated teams. So now we'll turn it over to Bill, who we may just call Neo between now and the end of the program. So Neo, take it away.
I appreciate that, Michael. Thank you for the introduction. And you really brought it with the glasses, so it threw me off a little bit. So I wasn't sure if it was you or not. And I was in my mind thinking, am I in the right spot here? So that was great. So thank you for the introduction, and thank you everybody for joining. This is the second in a series of three webinars that we're doing, and we're excited to be a part of. As we jump into this one, it looks like we're having a slight bit of technical difficulty with the slide presentation. So no worries about that. We're going to be doing mostly discussion anyways. But starting off, we have a great panel for you today. Fortunately, we have a couple great cybersecurity and compliance specialists with us to talk about AI and how AI intersects with what's going on in the cybersecurity landscape today. So we're really excited to talk about that. Before jumping in, I want to do some introductions and let them both speak about their backgrounds. So maybe Ryan Ray, who's with us today. Ryan, can you start off maybe introducing yourself and your background before we get started?
Sure. Hey, everyone. Ryan Ray. I'm with Slalom Consulting. I lead our cybersecurity and risk management practice. And before that, I was also a cybersecurity and risk management practice leader for a Big Four consulting firm. And way before that, I did a decade in network engineering. So it's good to see everyone today. Thanks.
Great. Thank you, Ryan. Really appreciate it. I did a long time in network engineering in the past as well. So I think, and I believe Rick has as well. So Rick, yep. If you don't mind doing your introduction, we might share that in common.
Sure. So this is Rick Passero. I'm the Chief Information Security Officer at AnatomyIT. I am honored to provide leadership to our internal security and compliance services, and internal technology functions. I'm a certified information system security professional with about 25 years experience in IT operations and cybersecurity. My experience extends across healthcare, financial services, insurance, legal, state, local, and federal government, and the technology sectors. My specialties are really around holistic cyber risk management and aiding clients in shaping secure architectures aligned with their enterprise goals. Looking forward to the conversation today.
Great. Thank you, Rick. Really appreciate it. So looks like our slides are now in check, so we're in pretty good shape. So you can see that. And if we move forward on the slides, we'll see where we'll jump right into the discussion. So just a quick view of the agenda and a reminder of some of the logistics. So if you have any questions during the webinar, please feel free to ask it in the Q&A, or to get our attention, put it in chat. Feel free to use either. We're looking forward to an interactive discussion, and we'll obviously leave some time at the end for questions. So our agenda today is going to be really focused about AI and cybersecurity, how you can understand what the threats are and what the prevention measures are to really enhance your security with best practices, and then what are some practical strategies that you can use to stay ahead of it. And there are multiple components of AI. One is how AI is being used by the attackers, how it's being used as a prevention measure, but also how is your data being used and exposed in terms of the AI tools out there, and making sure that you know the usage of your data and how it's being exposed to some of these platforms. So if we jump right in, look, AI and cybersecurity is a big topic, so we're going to try to narrow it down a little bit. There's certainly a lot of attention being made on AI today, and it feels like everybody is talking about it. So maybe we'll start with more level setting on, what are we talking about when we talk about AI? And really, maybe Ryan, you can get us kind of oriented
Sure.
around AI in general.
Yeah, no, thanks for that, Bill. I think the way to think about it, right? Because there's a lot of terms being thrown around. There's everything from AI to ML to deep learning to Gen AI, right? Which is probably where a lot of the the traction over the last few years has come from. But if you want to think of it from a high level standpoint, artificial intelligence at the highest level is a science of creating machines that can possibly think like humans, right? It can do things that are considered, say, smart, right, in a sense. And it can, one big differentiator is that it can process large amounts of data, right, at a time, with the goal of artificial intelligence broadly, again, right, being able to recognize patterns, maybe make decisions and judgments. If you go the next layer deep, if you will, from a machine learning standpoint. So we just double clicked on AI. All right, well, now we're to machine learning, right? And at its core, it's that subset which enables computers, right, to learn from data without being explicitly programmed, right? Think of it as a teacher, a computer to recognize patterns and make decisions based on examples rather than, say, explicit instructions. Now, if you double click again from machine learning, and I know I'm getting deep here, no pun intended, but we're arriving at deep learning. Right. And the way we define deep learning, it's a type of machine learning, right? We're going down here, right? That uses neural networks. I know some of you have probably heard that term, right? To learn data in a way that's similar to a human brain. All right, well, Ryan, what's a neural network, right? Well, that's technically a machine learning program or model, right? That makes decisions to mimic the way that as we think, right? And I'm like, okay, well, deep learning, what's the deep part of that? What's the deep definition here, right? It refers to those multiple layers of neural networks, right, that make up that complex system. Now, bear with me, double click one more time from deep learning into now Gen AI, which is probably one of the most popular topics that I'm sure all of us on the call are wildly aware of, at least over the last year, right? We kind of shifted, I feel like, socially from metaverse now to Gen AI, right, as a big topic. And that's, again, Gen AI is a technology that uses, again, those neural networks to create new and original content, right? So I know I just kind of went through 4 layers there, but I think it's really important, Bill, to kind of level set on, I hear, clients all the time kind of throwing around those terms. And I think it's really important to get, no pun intended, smart on all 4 layers of that. So thanks, Bill.
Absolutely. No, and I appreciate that. And I think that's part of the challenge. And even discussing it in terms of cybersecurity is there's so many aspects of it that you have to understand why it's important to worry about now. And just specific to everyday life and what you're seeing today, Ryan, can you give some examples where those applications are being used and some of our attendees might be running into them?
Yeah, no, that's a great point. I mean, I've got a few examples here. Self-driving cars, right? They actually use models to automatically detect, road signs and pedestrians, right? We're seeing that today, especially out on the West Coast. Defense systems, right, are using deep learning to, automatically flag areas of interest from a satellite imagery standpoint. From a healthcare standpoint, medical imaging. I think this is very critical and super interesting when it comes to analyzing, well, how do we detect cancer cells, right, faster and with more precision, right, from a medical diagnosis standpoint. And then, from an industry standpoint, factories are using AI applications to automatically detect when people or objects are within like an unsafe distance of machines, right? Think about these large Amazon warehouses, right? And being able to understand where those folks are located and then automatically alert there, right? There's many more examples, but those are a few that immediately come to mind. Thanks, Bill.
Yeah, and those are great examples that they're helping us in the business world move faster, more efficiently, and likely more effectively than even humans can do. So really great examples. But with that probably comes some fear and some concerns about how do you secure yourself against it. So Rick, maybe you can help us understand how AI is currently being utilized in cybersecurity in general.
Sure. So as Ryan alluded to, AI has just recently entered the realm of public discourse with the explosion of popularity of Gen AI and large language models that have really taken the public's imagination. But really, we've been leveraging various forms of AI effectively in the cybersecurity industry for many years. As you said, to move faster and more effectively, and to as a force multiplier to give our security teams a scale that it simply would not be possible to uh, put up an effective defense against the scale of attacks that we're coming against without force multipliers of our own. So some of the ways we do that are in threat detection and response. We use AI to detect anomalies and suspicious activities really in real time, which allows us to identify threats much faster than a human could ever hope to. Those machine learning models that Ryan spoke about are used to analyze vast amounts of data to recognize patterns that could be indicative of a potential cyber attack. We also use user behavior analytics on a similar topic. So this is where something like an endpoint detection and response would monitor user behavior to detect deviations from what's normal, which could indicate anything from an insider threat to a compromised account. Um, should that staff member in marketing really be downloading the entire contents of your engineering folder, kind of a thing? It allows us to kind of detect that kind of thing in real time, and not only see it, but identify that it's something that doesn't usually happen and probably warrants additional investigation by humans. The next level from that, I would say, is automated incident response. So we use AI-powered systems to automate the responses to a lot of different to really reduce the response time and minimize the damage, again, far faster than a human being could ever hope to do. So examples of that could be anything from automated containment of a compromised system to automated patch management. Let's see, next we have threat intelligence and prediction, where we use AI to aggregate and analyze threat data from millions of different sources and providing insights into what are the emerging threats and potential attack vectors that are happening right now across the globe. And then we use predictive analytics there to help anticipate and defend against future attacks similar to what's happening right now on the other side of the planet. I guess lastly, I would close with just phishing and general malware detection. We use AI to enhance both email filtering and malware detection in general by identifying really subtle indicators of something that could indicate phishing attempts or malicious code. Those deep learning models that Ryan was talking about are especially effective there at recognizing sophisticated phishing attempts.
Yeah. And I think you bring up a very interesting point about the force multiplier, and that works for kind of the threat actors, right? Being able to increase the threats that are coming at us, but also the prevention measures. You can really, scale up how you're looking at threats leveraging AI. And historically, from a network perspective, we always looked at network log consolidation, log correlation, looking for events were like it was like a needle in a haystack, right? Now that you can leverage I assume that's helping you be able to look across all of this data that you're collecting at the network level, user level, all of that, and be able to identify threats and react accordingly. Is that correct?
Exactly, absolutely.
Yeah, yeah, and really interesting. Well, AI is such a broad topic, and we're focused very specifically on cybersecurity, which is really helpful. And as businesses start to look at, okay, that's a lot, right? What we just said in terms of AI, what it is, how it's being used in positive ways, how it's being used in ways for businesses to protect their environments against threats. Perfect. But how can we even go deeper into the question of how do we enhance our security with best practices, right? So whether it's leveraging cutting edge practices, policies and tools, how do you protect against AI driven attacks? And how do you protect your specific data and IP against AI consumption, right? So we'll dive into that area just a little bit. So Rick, maybe you can start us off. When you talked about all of the ways that cybersecurity is leveraging AI tools, but maybe we can get into some specific examples of where AI is used to combat things like phishing and ransomware attacks.
Sure. So AI is increasingly being used. As I said, really just the machine learning effect there when it comes to phishing attacks. Phishing attacks are becoming more and more sophisticated. The threat actors have access to these large language models as well, and they are using those to not only eliminate the kind of historical MO of kind of poorly written emails to kind of self-select their targets, um, but also to really dial in what we call spear phishing. So rather than sending spam basically where it's generic emails to thousands of targets hoping that somebody isn't paying attention and clicks a link, the threat actors are actually using AI tools to harvest data. We call it open source intelligence data. So that's things like your social media pages and your organization's LinkedIn page to really craft very specific and very tricky targeted attacks that they know who your boss's name is, they know what kind of technologies you use from people's LinkedIn profiles and what kind of skills your IT department has listed on their LinkedIn page. And they're really able to craft very sophisticated attacks there. So on the defensive side, the email security products are basically using the same tools. They are becoming more and more sophisticated on the defensive side. We're able to identify a lot more of these, but it really is kind of a losing battle. There is, in a sense, we will always be a step behind the technology. It's been that way really throughout the history of man, throughout the history of warfare. You build a taller wall on your castle. I'm going to build a bigger trebuchet to knock it down. So what do we do there? Really, the backup is less sexy than AI. It's the fallback is resilient policies, practices, user training, really just the basics of good IT and solid cybersecurity foundations are the most effective defense. There are fancy tools and expensive tools we can go out and talk about, but there's really no substitute for human beings exercising their intelligence.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. And I think when you think about the human impact of the interaction, is the human aware of what is coming at them? Is the threat real? Is it a threat or is it a real, email or inquiry? And having to make that delineation goes to training and making sure that employees and workers are all trained to understand what's coming at them. And as you said, I think what's interesting, what we're seeing is that even 2 years ago, you could see the, misspellings in the emails. You could see the language differences in the emails. AI is changing that because AI is simulating those emails in a tighter way, and they're very easy to fall for. So you have to be super aware of what you're responding to and how you're responding to it in email. Um, Ryan, when you think about AI in contributing to the development of your proactive cybersecurity strategies, what can people do practically today to really leverage it for that?
No, I think there's some definitely some good points there, right? Because if you think of number one, I think the most important thing, both from a personal standpoint and an enterprise standpoint, at the end of the day, and this goes for a lot of my current clients, you need what are you trying to protect from a data standpoint, right? And once you understand exactly what you're trying to protect, then you can create the defenses for that, right? And as you alluded to earlier, right, when I was doing this 20 25 years ago, right, it was just the traditional perimeter, right, around endpoints and servers, and that was kind of what you had, right? And then we expanded to mobile, and now identity and websites, right? That's what's called the modern perimeter. And then the expanding perimeter, which you mentioned earlier, really is around Miro, collaboration tools, social media, cloud, right? And so it's really expanded. That attack surface overall has truly expanded, especially honestly over just the last 7 years, right? With the explosion of both AI and cloud. And I think it's really important to understand, number one, what are you protecting? And then, from a tooling standpoint, there's, generally, 6 or 7 aspects that I think about, right? There's the standard infrastructure and network, which I alluded to. There's identity and access management, right? There's security operations, which is hopefully protecting the enterprise. You've got data security, which I mentioned. And then you have this building of applications and understanding the security of that. And then your governance, risk, and compliance. And so those are kind of the aspects that we think about. And there's really 5 kind of keynotes that I think through, especially with enterprises and Rick, I think you alluded to some of this earlier, really around security operations, right? And I think you touched on some of this, but number one, how does AI contribute to the development of these type of strategies? Well, what I'm seeing with a lot of my clients right now, it's really been a forcing function where it's like, yes, we understand what we need to do. Yes, we understand what we need to protect. Yes, we understand. I didn't necessarily say mobilize, right, and enact, right? But it's truly a forcing function of, oh yeah, those plans and capabilities that we said we were going to work on 5 years ago have immediately come to the forefront, right? Because AI, again, is a forcing function of, okay, well, do you understand? Let's say you launch a chatbot, right? Let's call it internally. Do you understand what that bot and what data it's accessing, right? Do you understand, how protected is that bot from, confidential information or, healthcare information or PII or PHI, right? It's critical, especially from those aspects. And again, back to some points around security operations and incident response, right? That's an enabler, right? How do we quickly contain an incident? Maybe we're not sure if it's an incident or not, but we need to, hey, we don't, things at this point are measured in seconds and minutes, right? I think long gone are the days of us measuring, well, we'll get to that tomorrow. Maybe something got leaked. It's like, no, we need ideally a bot to contain those incidents immediately and then understand, was that a threat or not? That's okay. You know what I mean? From a security operations standpoint, again, which was mentioned around threat hunting and vulnerability management, understanding what are those hidden threats, right? We understand where there's what's called, signature-based threats, but what about those behavioral threats? Understanding, as Rick, you alluded to earlier around behavior patterns. I think that's going to become even more so in the forefront. Again, these are topics that, at least within what I'll call industry, we've talked about, but not really enacted. Hey, that's a nice to have. Well, in my opinion, a lot of these nice to haves around analyzing behavior patterns, understanding hidden threats have really come to the forefront, right? And it's really starting to push, some of those strategies, especially in the identity and access management, same aspect, analyzing those behavioral biometrics. And then a big theme of mine is also observability, right? Again, behavior analysis, understanding, those, what are the normal patterns of behavior, right? And then when does an extreme happen, and do we need to take a look at that? And so AI is an enabler for those, especially from, again, I've been more on the defensive theme here, but those are enablers that, in my opinion, have shifted from nice to have to must to have from an artificial intelligence. Especially again, if you remember those 4 layers that I referenced earlier, especially from a Gen AI standpoint. That's really where I'm seeing my clients, and I'll just use Microsoft Copilot just as an example, because a lot of enterprises have that stack, and so that's kind of their first toe that they're dipping into the Gen AI stack, and so there's lots of lessons learned there. So really important. Thanks, Phil.
Yeah, no, that's great. And it's certainly, as you said, like you might be interacting with AI and not even know it, right? But certainly Copilot is where a lot of people are starting to see it, or if you've done anything with OpenAI, you certainly have seen the power of it. And really, as you start to look at it and say, okay, how can I use AI to not only create some resiliency in my business and some efficiency, but how can I continue to adapt to what's coming? And that's part of the problem is, right, where we are today in terms of the tools that we need to protect our cyber defense perimeter are different than what they were even a year ago. And they'll be different in probably 6 to 12 months from now. So Rick, how can you kind of evolve as it's evolving, probably quicker than we've ever seen?
Yeah, that's a good point. As I was saying before, AI can significantly enhance the resilience and adaptability of cybersecurity systems, and I think it can be almost a ridiculously effective force multiplier. I really like that phrase, force multiplier, when talking about AI, because that's really what it is in the cyber realm. So how can AI help? First of all, integrate all those tools. That's the obvious part. They do work as that force multiplier. So some of the biggest, most impactful areas we've seen this are really just around decision making. You've got a small team of experts generally on a security team. There's never enough of us to go around. So AI is really useful in allowing us in providing us with contextual insights and analyzing data in real time from multiple sources, allowing the experts that you do have on staff to make informed decisions during an incident. We also really use AI to help prioritize threats based on their potential impact and really to focus security teams on the most critical issues first, which is really essential for effective incident management. I think the biggest thing here, though, is that AI is really important. It is a force multiplier, but it's not a panacea. It certainly is not a replacement for an effective security team or security expertise yet. There's still no substitute in cybersecurity and really in most fields still for human intelligence. So while the tools can definitely help, it does always come back to that expertise and having a smart human who understands the big picture and the business context of everything that's going on and can make those business decisions. You're muted, Bill.
Sorry, I hit the mute button by accident, so I was talking to myself once again. You talk about the human intelligence side of it, and we can talk about user awareness training, and a lot of this does fall into that bucket of good IT practices, right? Like, so AI is new, AI is a force multiplier, AI is complex, but really good IT practices are important. And kind of off the cuff, and the reason why I put it on mute because I don't want this to bump up, but I got a call yesterday from American Express fraud detection, and it looked real. Like, I don't know if this will come in, but it looked like an American Express call. And when a fraud hits your account, they typically will call you if they think it's fraud. Well, it was a fraud detection call, right? And so there were some things that happened during that call that made me kind of question it. One was I can open up my app in American Express and see that there were no charges tried. They had a lot of information about me, which is what you said. They collect information using AI. They knew my home address. They knew my email on record with American Express, or they guessed it as best that they could, right? And so they had a lot of answers to my questions, but I still didn't give them anything. And I finally hung up and called American Express directly, and confirm that it was a fraud. But the ability for them to collect information about me that sounds credible enough was pretty easy for them to do. Email address that might be on record with American Express, some close component of the card number, because of some of these compromises that have happened. And if I wasn't aware, I might have fallen for it and given them some information that would have compromised my account even further. So I think, AI is this broad challenge, but the human is still a big part of detecting the threat. So I think it's a great point. So Ryan, kind of leading into what I was going to ask you, when you integrate AI, even if it's just leveraging Copilot or leveraging some major components of AI, and then leveraging it into your cybersecurity infrastructure, how do you bring your users along with that?
No, I think that's a great question, and there's a few components, right, to be very mindful of, and you brought up some great points around, and I definitely have coached folks with exactly what you just did. Call them back, right? Call the enterprise back. Do not trust, because I was actually having a conversation with our CISO last week, where the two main issues that we're seeing with other enterprises is really, number one, around deepfakes, right? We may touch on this a little bit too, and then number two, back to phishing, right? I think one of the surprising things is it's the old saying, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. And we're still seeing a lot of that, right? A lot of the existing, offensive, tools and schemes that, threat actors are using continue to work successfully. And it's AI simply enhancing that, right? That data that you ran into from Amex was enhanced, and probably the speed to market, right? So that maybe that phone call went to 1,000 people, or 10,000 people at one time. Right? We're not sure, right? And so, a few key points really around making sure from an AI perspective. Number one, that we're engineering for humans, right? Let's not forget, and Rick, I think you made this salient point around, let's not forget the human, and especially the business context, right? To your point around that, making sure that we're aligning to, number one, human values, right? Let's not forget about that, because there's the technology piece, but there's always, that trifecta of people, process, and tool, or technology, if you will. Well, AI may be solving for one of those, but let's not forget about the people and process around that. I think the second thing is really around intellectual property. This is a big one, right? You're starting to already see lawsuits, especially from, and possibly rightfully so, right, from authors saying, hey, I didn't, allow you to use that data, right? And that's data that I had created. So you've got to be extremely cautious of, trademarked or copyrighted content. The third thing is really around leading with privacy and regulatory. Again, making sure that we're promoting user consent and control, right? The fourth thing, Rick, I think you mentioned a little bit about this, test, monitor, and validate, making sure that you've got really good guardrails, especially, again, from an enterprise standpoint. I know a lot of folks on the call are involved with probably both, healthcare, and, maybe even financial services, right? Those are two large verticals right now that are, taking a close look at, artificial intelligence, and maybe keeping it in what we call a sandbox or development environment, but not launching that to full production where it's client facing, right? Because we are still, wrapping our arms around that. And I think one of the most important things, and the last one, is really around what we call responsible AI, right? Prioritizing that ethical behavior and fairness and accountability in AI development and deployment. So thanks, Bill.
Yeah, that's really good. And I think, as you look at all of the challenges with AI, as you said, trademark infringement, how do you protect your IP? Not only is AI being used to, make us more efficient, but it also could be getting us into trouble and we don't even know it, right? And I think that is a really interesting concept of it, or context of it. So as we look at staying ahead of it, so we already talked about the speed of change that's happening in the kind of that cybersecurity threat landscape. And we know in the coming months, it's going to change even more rapidly, right? Like, so how do you suggest people, Ryan, stay informed of kind of the latest threats and solutions that can protect against those threats?
No, that's a great question, Bill. And there's four things that I think about when it comes to staying on top of threats and solutions. And you don't necessarily there is no one, I wish there was one magic answer, right? Where it's like, all right, well, just go to this one place and you will be able to immediately absorb all of this information. But again, our artificial intelligence, which, technically I believe, came out in the 50s, right? It's both old and new. I think the new part is just us embracing that. And so number one is really around, for those, especially in the tech industries, threat intelligent platforms, right? They're out there. NIST offers that to understand truly, what kind of threats are we facing. Number two would be industry specific news and blogs. I do a lot of this, right? Reading things like Krebs on Security, CISA.gov, and Dark Reading are a few of my favorites personally. Maybe my favorite how to keep informed is, if for those that can go, is to any type of security conference or like this, a webinar, right? RSA is a big one. Black Hat, I believe, just happened maybe earlier this month. DEF CON is another good one, to really understand really a couple of things. And at least this is what I get out of those type of AWS Reinforce is another good one. Number one, understanding, what types of vendors are out there, right? Because that'll probably give you a sense of what we need to be protecting, and what's on the horizon, right? And then really just, meeting with other leaders, what are the issues that they are facing, right? What are, is data loss protection number one for you, right? Or is it, hey, we're launching Gen AI and we've really got to get on top of what's going through, our data sources from a PII standpoint. And that really leads me to, again, the fourth one here, collaborating with your peers and experts, really just staying in touch that way, and professionals in the field, are really the four main ways that I've approached it. So I don't think there is one magic answer, but yeah, thanks, Bill. Yeah.
No, I think that's spot on, and you're right. There's so many sources out there. Leverage those sources, right? Because like you said, there's not one place, because there's legal components of it, there's technical components, there's just practical components of it. But you have to just embrace all of the options that are out there to kind of stay up to date on it. Now, Rick, just in closing, before we head to Q&A, as we've talked about, this is evolving, and there's probably some exciting things coming up in terms of how AI will be used in cybersecurity going forward. Anything that we should expect in the coming months, year, that you think is going to change it or evolve it even more rapidly?
Absolutely. So first of all, I'll take the opportunity to kind of beat on this drum one more time. I think there is going to be continued and increasing pressure to do the fundamentals of IT and cybersecurity extraordinarily well. AI has a way of flushing out all of the little problems that historically we might not have even paid attention to. But even something like basic data protection or identity and access management principles, things like the principle of least privilege, which I learned about in IT school 25 years ago. You go and roll out Copilot, and that will flush out all the little places where you don't have your access control effectively managed. So, if you're not careful, the front desk receptionist can easily just go in there and ask, how much did the CEO make last year? So that's going to be really important. On the tech side, I think there are going to be more advanced predictive analytics. These AI models are becoming increasingly adept at predicting potential threats. And with that, we will start to see more autonomous cybersecurity systems. The cyber tools that we are using are continuously evolving, and they will continue to do so to become more autonomous, capable of self-learning from new threats and autonomously repairing vulnerabilities or containing threats. On the offensive side, AI is and will continue to increasingly be used offensively, where AI-driven red teams or threat actors will either continue simulate or actually perpetrate advanced attack scenarios to test an organization's defensive. These kind of tools never remained in the hands of exclusively the good guys for a very long time, unfortunately. So I think we are going to continue to see growth in AI-driven cyber deceptions, those deep fakes that Ryan spoke about, and more sophisticated phishing attacks. That facet of the human really being the most important aspect of the defense means that the attackers know that too. So they're going to continue to try to find ways to trick the humans, to get us to do things that we shouldn't do to let them in. And at the end of the day, there's really no substitute for a well-trained user and threat intelligence and having all the right tools and teams in place.
No, that's great. And what's really interesting is as we've gone through this whole discussion is, good fundamentals are going to be important no matter what evolves with AI, right? So whether it's, privileged access management, whether it's, users being targeted, that's always going to happen. So, protecting the basics is really going to be important no matter what happens in the future. And as you said, humans can be tricked very easily where it's what's going to be the weakness there. And Michael put on the glasses at the beginning of the call and I didn't know who he was, right? He had those glasses on. So I was pretty tricked there. But, as you start to look forward to the changes in AI, the reality is that keep doing the basics well and you'll be ready for the next thing. And I think that's really important to understand as we close here. So we do have a couple questions I'd like to throw at you both that came in. One is specific about healthcare, but I actually think it could apply to most industries, right? As you start to, let's say healthcare organizations, so it's a healthcare specific question, as they start to implement AI, do these organizations need to step back and look at the legalities of putting patient data into AI platforms, right? And I know that's a broad question, but the reality is does the patient control that data or does the practitioner own that data? And then how do you think about the legalities of that being put into AI models? Maybe Rick, you could start off, and you spend a lot of time in healthcare specifically.
Ooh, that's a tricky one.
Put you on the
So,
spot.
I mean, the quick answer is yes, absolutely. Healthcare organizations do need to evaluate the use of any of these tools from a legal perspective. It's especially tricky because we don't really know exactly what the capabilities of these things are going to be 5 minutes from now. Is it okay to put, patient information into your private instance of Copilot? Probably, maybe, I don't know, ask your lawyer. That might be okay today, but with the development of these things, the scary thing to me is that what might be okay now be based on the limitations of the technology. As this technology continues to grow, they develop the ability to correlate data in new ways and to reach out to new different data sources. So even using public LLMs like ChatGPT, especially in the very early days before there was more public awareness around this, we saw a lot of essentially data exfiltration happening at the hands of users, which are insider threats, unbeknownst to them, because we just didn't know what this technology can do and what the limitations are. And now all that data is potentially in there. It was used to train the model. That model is getting increasingly more sophisticated. So, I wouldn't want to be the lawyer that's charged with figuring out that answer from the legal side. Let me put it that way. Ryan, you have anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, no, I think you made some great points, and yeah, I will also say I'm not a lawyer before I say anything. But to your point, I think it comes back to understanding. I think the short answer, and I'm looking at the chat here, my knee-jerk reaction to this would be yes, from a data privacy standpoint, right? But the famous consulting answer is, right, it depends. But I think understanding, number one, what are the acceptable uses of AI within that enterprise, I think that's going to be really important in setting those guardrails, and then informing. We have to inform our clients, right, if we're using AI, just as an example, right? And so I think that's going to be part of it, and I think making sure that you educate both your customers or consumers and the enterprise themselves around, the managed use of that data. And, typically you are going to have to keep some sort of, auditable record of that if you are going to be using AI, right? Because back to the attorney forum of, hey, well, you made a decision. What prompted you to make that decision, right? And if your fallback is, well, AI told me, well, I'm sure there's a web of legalities, right, that you would have to muddle through for that. So I think, those are the things that, that come top of mind to me from a data privacy and then from a legal standpoint. So I would always side on, err on the side of caution, if you will, with all of that, to make sure that I'd rather over-inform than under-inform in the majority of those cases. Thanks.
Absolutely. I think that's great. Really great feedback from both of you all. And when you think about notification to the patient like that, you're using their data in unique and novel ways that might increase their patient care, but might expose their data in ways that they don't even understand today. It likely will have to come in the terms of the privacy policies and whatnot going forward. So certainly an interesting case study for sure as we go forward. And the scary part being that, and Rick, I think you said it, is like how you give the data today might be normalized where your client, information can't be connected to it. But maybe in 2 months from now, that correlation happens, and then all of a sudden you put in the patient record with the diagnosis, for example, and then that creates a legality issue. So knowing how it's going to be used now is one thing, knowing how it's going to evolve in the future is another. Well, look, I think we're at about the end of our time here. We don't have any more questions in here, but certainly really enjoyed this discussion. And thank you both, Ryan and Rick. It was fantastic discussion today. Hopefully, it was valuable for everybody on the webinar. And we look forward to seeing some of you and hopefully most of you on September 18th for our third in this series. So thank you, everyone, and have a great day.
Thanks, everyone.